Hey guys, Comic Boom here to review Joy Operations. I'm going to bring you joy, people. And I wish I could say I was going to bring you joy, the emotion, but that's not going to happen. We are reviewing Joy Operations, written by Brian Michael Bendis with amazing art by Byrne. Anyways, this is a surprisingly interesting tale. Now, I've gone on my Bendis rants before, people. I got to tell you, I'm not a huge Bendis fan for his latest work. Huge fan of Bendis' early work, but like so many of us, I'm just baffled by his later work. But I think Joy Operations, it's got elements of his usual dialogue, tendencies for over-dialoguing an issue and covering up some beautiful art. But there's some minimization of that in this Joy Operations, and it's certainly better. This is better than anything that Brian Michael Bendis is doing at DC at the moment, and it's interesting. And we're going to get into it, and I just want to first show off the cover here. Stephen Byrne, the artist. This is actually created. Joy Operations is created by Brian Michael Bendis and Stephen Byrne, and so they're co-creators of this. And this is the lettering is by Joshua Reed. Cover A, which is to my left. I guess no. I guess not. Cover A is to my right. Sorry, I'm screwed up because I see things backwards here. But the cover A is actually done by Stephen Byrne, and cover B is the David Mack cover, and that's this one right here. And in any event, very well done. And yeah, the art here is fantastic in this issue, as we're going to get into it. And so let's do precisely that, shall we? And all right, now one of the things that is initially confusing about this particular comic is that I had a difficult time sort of getting into the world that Brian Michael Bendis was setting up here for Joy Operations. So it did require for me multiple reads. But that wasn't a bad thing. And the reason why that wasn't a bad thing is because of the incredible art by Stephen Byrne. This is really good. The lead character we're introduced to right away. Her name is Joy. Surprise, surprise. Her name is Joy Corrigan. And she is actually an envoy, sort of like a bodyguard to a woman by the name of Catherine Mentus, who is leader of the Genando Trust. This is set in a world where the entire world is essentially composed of 7 trusts. And each of these trusts appears to have different qualities about them, different qualities of life. I don't know. There's so much that isn't said. We're only actually introduced to 2 of the 7 trusts in the world, the Genando Trust and the Peachtree Trust. You've heard that right. Peachtree Trust and the Genando Trust. And this Joy Corrigan, she's actually the special bodyguard of the leader of the 7th trust, the Genando Trust. Now, most of this issue consists of there's a voice talking in the head of Joy. So this lead character named Joy Corrigan, she's got this voice that's talking in her head, and throughout the entire narrative, throughout the entire story, the lettering is or the caption boxes are in sort of green, and that's the voice talking in Joy's head. And what's really odd here is that Joy seems to be in a state of denial until about halfway to 3/4 of the way through the comic. She seems to be in a state of denial that her voice is talking to her in her head, but she doesn't say anything. And so that's why I was initially confused. I really wasn't sure if this was an omniscient third-party narrator, but then I got the impression that this was somebody talking in the character's head, which it ended up being the case. But then I wasn't sure if this was the character actually doing the actions. I was actually confused. And the story essentially starts off with this Joy character, this envoy, and the spelling of envoy is interesting. It's capital E-N period V-O-I. She's an envoy. So Uh, I'm not really sure what that's supposed to mean, but it reminds me a little bit of Greg Rucka's Lazarus, except it's got a very, very different feel to it. So don't get me wrong, but it's the art is really good. It's Stephen Byrne on the art is absolutely fantastic, and it appears in this opening issue, and I had to reread this multiple times to get it, and that's not. I don't think that's a good thing. Although I will say that Stephen Byrne's art is so good, it's so beautiful, and the coloring is magnificent. It's a joy to digitally look at this and to see this. Particularly, I read my comics on my iMac, my digital comics. This is an absolutely beautifully illustrated comic book, so it's a joy to just look at, and that's a compliment. And I want to give some props here to Brian Michael Bendis, because he does come under a lot of scrutiny, and I've given him a bad rap at DC, or rather, I won't say a bad rap. I've given him constructive criticism, but his DC work is just, I'm just not a fan of it. But this is much better. Now, there is a lot of dialogue here, and the irony here is there's literally talking heads here. I mean, there's literally talking heads that go on and on, but there's amazing art that seems to that is everywhere. And this envoy is this Joy character is literally trying to take care of her. Her job is to protect this Catherine Mentus, who is the leader of the Genando Trust, one of the 7 trusts in the world. But she's attacked by one of these jelly creatures, which is also kind of another bodyguard of the Genando Trust. So it's not really clear what's going on. Meanwhile, she's got this voice talking in her head. There are other police that get involved, or other officers that get involved, because she's attacked by this jelly creature called. There's a lot of different terminology here. This Girk's heart, this jelly creature called a Girk's heart, essentially attacks her, but it's not supposed to attack her because she's looking after Catherine Mentus, the leader of the Genando Trust. But meanwhile, there's this voice in her head that essentially tells her that, look, I'm in your head for a reason. I'm actually an envoy. I'm trapped in your head. My name is Hampton. There's this voice in Joy's head called Hampton, and he claims to be a member of another trust called the Peach Tree Trust, which is a trust representing another portion of the world that is warning her that, look, the person you're protecting, this Catherine Mentus, she's really a bad person. She's trying to set up a new trust with new technology that is not approved by the other 6 trusts in the world, and we need to take her down. And so we thought the best way to take Catherine Mentus down was for me to infiltrate your mind and to operate and to talk to you in your head. And of course, this Joy Kurgan, her initial instinct is to get herself arrested. She wants to report herself in to her superiors and saying, look, there's some. I'm assuming she's thinking that there's corporate espionage going on. They're talking to me. They're talking in my head. Somehow they got into my head. And so it's interesting. And this is where, being a little bit, if I was being a little bit of a jerk here, I've criticized Bendis before by having too much dialogue. And Bendis is really good at talking heads. There are literally double-page spreads here of total talking heads straight across the board, okay? Now, and she's literally having a conversation with another entity, with another person in her head. So she's talking to another envoy in her head, who's the envoy of another trust organization. And she doesn't know what to do. She's confused. I'm not exactly sure how old this Joy character is. She's got white hair. She seems to have sort of like a dark hair and then a white streak. I'm not sure how old. Is she 40? Is she in her early 50s? She's pretty good if she's in her early 50s. I'm not really sure what's going on, but she wants this voice to get out of her head, and she's very frustrated with it. But this voice is warning her that, look, your boss, this Catherine Mentus, this leader of the Genando Trust, is a bad person. But the problem is that this voice, this Hampton voice, his name is Hampton. He doesn't give her any evidence at all in this opening issue. So, but as a matter of fact, as a criticism here, potential criticism, I think that there's literally a double-page spread, beautifully drawn again by Stephen Byrne, where we're shown this Catherine Mentus. She looks incredible. She looks sort of like this powerful female corporate character, and it's about, she's of all the 7 leaders of all the trusts, she is the most. Interesting way of putting it. She is the most. She's the most what? She's just it. That's just it. She is the most. She's the most of the most. So she's apparently just awesome, and she plays the odds, but she plays the odds with lives. That's a direct quote. And she doesn't care what she has to sacrifice to get to the top. Well, she's creating a brand new trust, and she's violating all kinds of rules to get there. And what Hampton, the voice inside Joy's head, is hoping to accomplish is to recruit Joy, this Joy Kerrigan, the envoy to Catherine Mentus, to recruit them to their side, to infiltrate and to spy, and to be basically a double agent to take down the Genando Trust, which is the most powerful of the 7 trusts in the world, and prevent the Genando Trust, led by Catherine Mentus, from creating an all-new powerful trust for the world. And hence the phrase, I guess, the title to the entire story, of course, Joy Operations. Because the operation takes place, I'm assuming that that's a play on the fact that this Hampton character is a voice speaking in Joy's head. So it's Joy Operations. So Joy is operating undercover. Joy is a double agent. Joy is probably... Right now, Joy is doubting what Hampton is telling her, saying, get out of my head. And when you think about it, what's interesting here, some of the questions that come into play is that there's a huge risk here. If you're a trust organization and you want to infiltrate another corporate trust, another corporation, a powerful world corporation, and you go to their lead bodyguard, their lead envoy, like Hampton did here, by infiltrating the mind of this Joy Kerrigan, that's a huge risk. Because if you're going to do that, well, what if Joy isn't on your side? Well, what this Hampton is hoping is that when he infiltrates the mind of Joy Kerrigan, that she can also, because they're mentally and psychologically connected, that she can pick up on some of his memories and emotions too. But she doesn't appear to be able to do that. And I think that's what's causing the problem here. But this issue ends with Hampton being able, apparently, to control some of the physical movements of Joy, so that it's not just that Hampton is capable of hearing and feeling the thoughts and the body and the physical pain of Joy. He can also control some of the actions that Joy does. So not only can this Hampton character that is in the mind of Joy Kerrigan, not only can he hear her thoughts and see what she sees, but he can also see and experience her same physical sensations. And all this is set in a world consisting of these separate 7 huge trusts that seem to control the quality of life of all its citizens, and this Genando Trust is the best one. Now, that's really all the information we're given in this opening issue. Again, the art here is fantastic. I want to give credit to Stephen Byrne. It's interesting. I wish we were given a little bit more, though. If I had one comment, I would say that one of the things that I notice often with writers like Jonathan Hickman on his independent work, like East of West, for example, or even his oh my God, I'm drawing a blank. His East of West, his Powers of X and House of X at Marvel also has explanatory notes. Jonathan Hickman has gotten very good at that. Even Bendis has gotten good at putting, at the beginning of his Justice League comic books, he's put sort of a summary of what's happening at the beginning. And that's appreciated. It's odd here that Bendis doesn't explain more of this world in the back. In the back of this comic, Bendis is really known for his letter pages. I mean, Bendis in his Powers in his Powers series and his other individual independent titles, Bendis is really well known for his letters pages. You could easily have, don't be surprised if you have 2 or 3 pages of letters pages. Here you got 1 page, 2 page, 3 pages of letters pages for Bendis, advertising his Pearl work, his Powers, and his other independent work that was originally published with his contract at DC. That was, of course, I think that was canceled, and now this is all at Dark Horse. But in any event, we don't really get a summary of this world. You really got to read this comic probably a couple of times to get a handle on what is happening in this world, what this world consists of. This is just a teaser. The question is this enough of a teaser to get readers to come back for the second issue? That's the question. And I'm not sure that it is. I am probably going to come back. The problem here is that I've been burned so many times by Bendis. I mean, I'm basically kind of the joke. I'm sort of like the comic book addict. I mean, my buddy Dark Knight has criticized me more than once for that. That I'll often come back and read comics that I don't like. And I've definitely come back and read probably more than my fair share of Bendis of comics that I know that I probably won't like. But this is actually a good comic. This is actually not a bad opening issue. This is interesting. This is clearly opening the doors up into a brand new world. The art here is exceptional. Stephen Byrne's art is absolutely exceptional. The dialogue is even minimized a bit because when the ongoing joke, I mean, we could say the joke here that literally this is a comic book ideally suited for Bendis because it's literally it's a person who has another head talking inside their mind. So it's like it's not just a one talking head. We got two talking heads with one head. Literally. Two talking heads within one head. Two talking people within one mind. This is ideally suited for Bendis. Now, I've criticized Bendis as well in the past for using far too much dialogue to cover up fantastic artists that he collaborates with. Well, I guess to his credit here, there's I think too much, there's still too much dialogue here. There's still too much dialogue, and there's too much dialogue, and if there's going to be this much dialogue, more should be revealed about the world that we're introduced to. But having said that, it's still interesting enough. It's interesting enough that I am curious. Stephen Byrne's art, a lot is said. I wish Bendis would let Stephen Byrne's art speak for itself, because it's clear from Stephen Byrne has images here where he shows Joy clearly. She's agonizing and she's reflecting, and you could tell she's wondering, what is this voice in her head? It's beautifully drawn, and we get that from Stephen Byrne's images at his attention to facial expressions, his attention to detail. It comes through with the art. We don't need the amount of dialogue that we have here. But again, it doesn't. I will say that the dialogue does not necessarily take away from the narrative as much as Bendis' past work. So this is a notable improvement on the work that I see at DC. In fact, Bendis' latest work at Justice League, there's actually an issue of the latest issue of Justice League 79 it was, where there's so much dialogue on the page that in one word balloon, the phrase word vomit is actually found. One of the characters actually says word vomit. So even Bendis is in on the joke and breaking the fourth wall, knowing that he's criticized for his dialogue. But at least here, the dialogue doesn't feel quite as heavy-handed as it is in the past. And it does work well with the art. The art here is fantastic. You get a sense that this is a very futuristic place. Stephen Byrne's art makes this comic book. You can tell this is a good collaboration. I'm definitely in for the long haul here. This art really is spectacular, and I'm really curious as to know what is this Joy going to do, because this is a character that is now going to be torn. She's torn. She is clearly a very talented, she's well known, and it's clear in the comic in her interaction with the other characters that she's very much respected as the envoy to Catherine Mentus, the leader of the Janando Trust. She's respected, and for her to betray the Janando Trust, it's extraordinary that this Hampton character, this envoy of the Peachtree Trust, felt that he could somehow convince her to betray her company. It's actually quite extraordinary. So there must be more at play here. There's so much more about this world that we need to know. But in any event, I'll be checking out future issues here. I do think that this is interesting. This comic book is probably in my view, it's worth a look-see. It's worth picking up. Check it out. And guys, hey, if you check it out, let me know what you think of it in the comments below. And yeah, until next time, Comic Boom out.